IMF program, even though it is not. Actually, it is IMF supported Pakistan program. So our country should take the ownership. We need to help to improve the misconception and highlight the key lesson learned from the last and the current programs and from the global experiences to help strengthen the ongoing engagements. In this regard, the role of the cabinet becomes very important because they can prepare professionals to have required tertiary education and relevant training to conduct technical analysis and to interpret the data and economy. Our negotiation team must have an unbiased understanding of the key economic indicator and qualification to use IMF's expertise to fill in the knowledge gaps. In this regard, SZABIST, Special Interest Group for Finance and Economics, aspired to promote in-house research collaboration, knowledge sharing, resource sharing, and enhancing skill of both faculty and students undergraduate and graduate level. Its objective is to hold seminar, policy dialogue, workshop on matters related to economics and finance. SZABIST provide forum for economic discussion that are not colored by the political narrative. Once again, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure the audience is eager to hear from our esteemed guest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for a very warm welcome and a succinct brief on the seminar. I would now like to invite our esteemed speakers to please come forward and take their seats on the stage. Our speakers for today are Dr. Esther Perez-Ruiz, IMF Resident Representative Pakistan, Dr. Zafar Hayat, Senior Economist, IMF Office, Islamabad, Ms. Seher Masood, Economist, IMF Office, Islamabad. Before we begin with the presentation, I would like to give a brief introduction of our speakers to the audience. Dr. Esther Perez-Ruiz, IMF Resident Representative, Pakistan, is associated with IMF Washington, D.C. since 2009 as Guatemala Mission Chief, Central America Division, Western Hemisphere Department. Before joining the IMF in 2009, she served various positions at the Spanish Ministry of Finance and the European Union. She has a track record of successful collaboration with country authorities and key stakeholders through effective engagement and communication skills, along with strong analytical background and contributions in all relevant macroeconomic areas. Along with her vast industry experience, she has also worked as an adjunct professor at University Carlos III, Madrid. She holds a master's and a doctor of philosophy in economics from University of Valencia, Spain. Thank you very much, ma'am. Our second speaker is Dr. Zafar Hayat. Dr. Zafar Hayat holds a PhD in monetary policy from School of Economics and Finance, Massey University, New Zealand. He has been working as senior economist for IMF since September 2018 and has more than 18 years of rich experience on various positions with State Bank of Pakistan. Thank you so much, Dr. Hayat. Our third panelist is Ms. Seher Masood. Ms. Seher Masood earned her Bachelor's of Science in Economics from Lahore University of Management Sciences and Master's degrees in Economics from University of Warwick, England. She has served as economic analyst for State Bank of Pakistan and has been with IMF in the same capacity since the last 2 years. So that was all about the introduction of our great speakers. Let's begin with their presentations.
Am I audible? Yes. So good morning to everyone, and thank you very much, really wholeheartedly, for making a space for the fund. I'm very pleased to be here alongside my colleagues from the Resident Representative Office in Pakistan, which comprises of Zafar, Sahir, and our office manager, who is sitting in first row. I just want to thank again to the board members, the deans, and faculty members for the opportunity to be here in the context of outreach. Very recently we completed the 6th review under the extended fund facility, and since I arrived back in November, we've been focusing on assisting the authorities and supporting the authorities to secure the completion of the review. And now that this is happily behind us, we are strengthening our outreach efforts this week in Karachi, last week in Lahore, and I also wanted to make explicit that we plan to come every 3 to 4 months to Karachi, and we are very much looking forward to continue strengthening our dialogue. In our outreach, we are prioritizing universities, institutes, and engagement with the academia, as we believe they are the opinion makers of today, of tomorrow, and they are privileged audiences for the fund. Let me get started with the presentation. We have the title, first of all, and thanks a lot, Zafar, given the title Pakistan and the IMF Building a Sustainable Future. And it will become apparent during the presentation that sustainability is one key important word in our partnership with the authorities, because we promote, our main goal is to promote policies that enhance macroeconomic stability in Pakistan. And we believe this is a precondition for long-lasting growth that benefits all Pakistanis. So let me cover what the presentation will be about with this overview slide. First of all, we are here to work on a partnership with the authorities in the context of a program that anchors our efforts and dialogue with the authorities, supported by the extended fund facility, and we want to provide a very brief overview of the goals within that program and the status of our partnership with the authorities under the EFF. Then we want to explain what we have accomplished in the context of the 6th review. Each of these EFFs comprises of several reviews, separated one quarter from each other. And these reviews are rounds of dialogue with the authorities and an opportunity to check that policies are on the right track. Now, the 6th review, what it does is to put forward a core set of policies to bring macroeconomic stability to Pakistan this year and beyond, and I will explain later. But in order to gauge, the extent of what has been achieved, first we need to explain the features of Pakistan's recovery from the pandemic and the role of economic policies during that recovery. I will say a few words at the end on the road ahead. And throughout the presentation, we will be switching between us, and I will be leaving to Zafar and Sahir a few slides. Now, what is this program all about? So Pakistan benefits from a 3-year EFF, and in terms of money, this is about $6 billion US. That program was approved by our board back in July 2019, following very detailed discussions with the authorities at the time on how to overcome the currency crisis that Pakistan was going through, and how to build forward and promote macroeconomic stability. And this is what this second bullet explains. The EFF supports the authorities' policies to help the recovery from COVID. So the program was agreed before COVID, but then COVID hit, it had to be recalibrated to accommodate the shock. And to ensure macroeconomic stability amongst macroeconomic stability first and foremost, debt sustainability, and advance reforms to lay the foundations for long-lasting growth. So there are some important institutional structural reforms in the program that take care of that objective. Now, the sixth review secures a package of measures that will strengthen macro stability following some relaxation, some warranted relaxation in policies to absorb the COVID shock. And in practical terms, the completion of the sixth review back on February the 2nd allows the authorities to draw about $1 billion, and that brings total budget support under the program to about $3 billion. Next slide. Now let me discuss briefly how Pakistan was recovering and how the recovery was gaining hold after the first waves of COVID and the role of economic policies in that recovery. Very clearly, economic activity was rebounding strongly from the first waves of COVID. And the left-hand chart shows, a suite of high-frequency indicators where you can see that there is this strong pickup in activity by the cement dispatches, by the large-scale manufacturing index, by the car sales. There are other indicators. This is just a selection of those, but they all speak of the same strength in the recovery. It's important to note that Pakistan entered the COVID pandemic with strengthened macroeconomic buffers, and that was accomplished under the EFF. Since the summer of 2020, we see a strong recovery has gained hold, and that because of the authorities' unprecedented and multifaceted response, drawing on that policy space that was opened in the early stages of the implementation of the program. As per the newly revised national account figures, as you know well, GDP growth for fiscal year 2021 is seen to be rebounded to 2.6%. So that's the first message. The second message is that strong recovery was possible because of two main reasons. First of all, clearly Pakistan successfully managed the multiple waves of the pandemic, preventing much worse growth performance vis-a-vis neighbors, vis-a-vis what we see globally. It was a successful journey through the pandemic, and we show this, in terms of infection rates. This is the flat, bold red line, and we are comparing here across many regional groups in the world. And you can see this is a very flattish pattern vis-a-vis all those swings. But secondly, supportive macroeconomic policies also contributed to the rebound. And as I mentioned, this was a comprehensive package, well encompassing, fiscal relaxation, primary deficit deteriorating by about 1.3 percentage points, and the rates in the central bank were reduced by 900 basis points, and there was a very successful deployment of emergency cash transfers, and there was regulatory forbearance, and so on and so forth. Here we have illustrated with just one of those policy levers, the policy rates. We could have added more, is just to illustrate this idea. Now, what is important to also recognize Yes, maybe. Okay, it's not working. Okay, maybe directly from the. I don't know if people in the room can assist us.
With the fixing it.
Very good. Thank you so much. Take your time. No problem. Maybe this is out of the heavy conditionality the IMF imposes. In the meantime, I was curious to learn, are you on virtual or on in-person learning at this point?
At this point we are recording and also we are on virtual as well. Because there's we are telecasting on YouTube, it's live.
Excellent. That was good. We cannot move from here. There we go.
यार इसको सिस्टम पे कॉपी करो यूएसबी से डायरेक्टली रन करो.
Thanks a lot for your efforts.
अच्छा इशू आ रहा है कोई सिस्टम से तो आप अच्छा पीडीएफ में कन्वर्ट नहीं हाँ पीडीएफ में कन्वर्ट करके
पीडीएफ में कर लो.
May I suggest to turn it into a PDF in case that helps? Yeah, PDF it.
Save as PDF.
Yeah, maybe that will be a solution.
इसको पीडीएफ में सेव कर लो. live streaming stop, and then after that, save as PDF.
Yes, you may continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you for fixing. Those technical glitches happen now and then. So, yes. So I was saying, picking up on the thread, it is also important to recognize why the recovery was gaining hold, supported by macroeconomic policies. Macroeconomic imbalances started to build as well. And by that, we mean external sector pressures started to emerge clearly in mid-2021. And that includes a widening current account deficit. You can see it here in the yellow bars, and that is coming from an increasing decoupling of imports, as illustrated by the red line, and exports that didn't grow at the same pace. And for several months in a row, the trade deficit, and this does not yet include the very latest data, marked $5 billion, which is very, very significant. And as a result, the exchange rate, which is primarily market determined right now, and this is one of the core institutional reforms that we pursued with the authorities, the exchange rate started to appreciate very, very significantly, and the central bank intervened, and there was some loss of reserves associated with that, and also because of the pass-through effects onto prices, and this is a powerful transmission mechanism in Pakistan, domestic price pressures were exacerbated, yes? So the external sector pressures, of course, it is important to note as well, owe to high international prices. So Pakistan is exposed to international prices Pakistan cannot control because it's mostly a price taker in the international markets. Now, alongside these negative terms of trade shock, macroeconomic policies and particularly fiscal policy turn out to be too expansionary, too stimulative, given the strength of the recovery. Next slide, please. So that is where the sixth review comes in, by delivering a core set of policies to bring macro stability and correct those imbalances that were emerging. Yes? Now, policies under the sixth review are geared towards promoting macroeconomic stability, and it is important to emphasize that the authorities' recent policy efforts are appropriate to safeguard macroeconomic stability, and those efforts, we see them across the most important dimensions. In the area of debt sustainability, the authorities are targeting a small reduction of the primary deficit this fiscal year to bring the primary deficit to a balanced position, so 0% of GDP. As for price stability, the authorities are focused on, in the near term, curbing inflation, strengthening exchange rate flexibility and international reserves, over the medium term, improving inflation outcomes via a more independent conduct of monetary policy. That will be facilitated by the approved SDP Amendment Act, which one of the prior actions in the sixth review. In terms of the energy sector, the whole, the main goal here is to turn it to viability, right? Because circular debt has been accumulating over the past few years, and it's adding to a large stock of circular debt. Is a legacy Pakistan has from the past. And those efforts have comprised actions in several fronts, bringing power tariffs in line with costs, rationalizing subsidies, so better targeting of the subsidies, and renegotiating purchasing power arrangements. So by clearing outstanding arrears with IPPs, you can actually undertake downward adjustments with tariffs. So this third bullet is one way of aligning by reducing tariffs rather than increasing tariffs, unlike the first bullet. And then there is one area that sometimes goes unnoticed, but that the IMF feels very attached to after COVID, which is improving the public sector's transparency and accountability, because during COVID, many governments across the world implemented this unprecedented support, in particular in the fiscal area. So these are publication and accountability requirements to provide more information to the public on how resources are being used, so that the population can do some checks and verifications, and a culture of accountability on how funds are being used is created, is built. Next slide, please. So now the slides that follow are going to cover each of the points I had alluded to in my previous presentation, starting with revenue measures. The GST reform that you may have heard of is designed with a twofold aim in the near term to detract stimulus from demand, and so to correct these external pressures, to preserve the downward debt trajectory, the debt trajectory under the baseline in the program. And once the final supplementary bill, which has the GST reform embedded, was passed, this is the trajectory. So it's reverting, yes. So it's curving. We leave the peak behind, and we continue to have this downward trajectory thanks to the FS bill. And the medium-term objective is to actually durably strengthen revenues. There is a need in Pakistan to rebuild the tax system. So the fifth review took care of the corporate income tax reform, and the sequencing was during COVID. It is better to fix first the basis for the corporates rather than for households. Yes. This review we have tackled the GST reform. The next reviews are going to work on the personal income tax, streamlining of the personal income tax. So in this fiscal year, tax revenues are expected to increase by 1.2 percentage points of GDP as compared to the previous fiscal year, and these are the measures that make it feasible to happen. GST reform, this is about broadening the tax base by removing unwarranted exemptions, and by unwarranted we mean those exemptions that are not justified by economic principles or social goals. And during the sixth review round of dialogue, we discussed for each of the schedules, for each of the lines and exemptions, which were warranted, which ones were not justified. PDL increases, this is important to emphasize. It's needed to secure this downward trend trajectory. It's one of the measures to accomplish that. And it's also reversing unwarranted reductions in the PDL earlier in 2020 when international prices were low and the PDL was used to reduce final prices to consumers. Now we need to reverse that. And then tax administration efforts. Going forward, the road ahead is for the authorities to continue rebuilding the tax system by tackling the personal income tax reform, making it more progressive, and we also have an agenda on GST harmonization. What is taxed like the federal, what is taxed like the provinces, and all these being consistent across Pakistan. I may now turn it to Sahar.
Hello, thank you, and good morning. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. So next slide, please. Okay, so just what to reiterate and to build further on what Esther presented earlier. So the primary deficit of 0% that is given excluding the grants, and two of the adjusters that are given in the program. One of them is the COVID vaccine spending, which comes around 352 billion, and also on the IPP payments. On the expenditure side, the government is now planning this year to increase the spending to 1.1% of GDP above the FY21 outturn. And in doing so, they're taking several measures. So one of them is rationalizing non-priority current spending and streamlining non-targeted subsidies, especially in the energy sector. Second is recalibrating investment spending or development spending in line with real execution rates that we have seen over the years. While doing so, the several programs on the development side have not been reduced. They have actually been scaled up. So for instance, this has been increased by 50% compared to last year. Health and education spending has increased by 27%. And on both these measures within the program, we have a certain target that you cannot spend below that for each quarter. So we're very closely monitoring this under the program. The government has also launched 2 new programs. One of them is the Kamyab Pakistan program and a new food subsidy program, so which it further expands social programs outside the West. Now, the measures on the spending side are very important because there has been, with the 6th review, there is an Article 4 consultation as well in the program. So under that, there is a section on the SDGs that shows that how much extra spending there is needed on the areas of health, education, water, sanitation, and power. And that comes around to 16% of GDP that of additional spending is needed. That it also shows that with additional spending, they need to increase the efficiency of the spending as well. So given the limited fiscal space, there is a need to recalibrate and move that to development spending so that the SDGs can actually be met by the 2030 date that has been set. Next. Okay, so we cannot talk about the fiscal without talking about the energy sector. On the energy sector, last year the circular debt flow was increased by 300 billion. So that's huge. And trying to make the energy sector viable, there are several measures that are being taken in the short run and in the medium term. In the short run, the government is trying to align the power tariffs with the cost recovery, and it is doing by adjusting the quarterly tariff adjustments that you've seen probably in December and October, and also the annual rebasing, and align it with cost recovery. Second is better targeting subsidies. A lot of these subsidies are given to people who actually don't deserve it in the sense that they're paying very cheap costs for the subsidies. So the subsidy reform is also part of the program that the authorities are working on. And one of the second step of that was just approved recently in January and now is being implemented from February this year. Another important step is the power purchase agreements. They have actually negotiated 20 of them. These were mostly domestic. The most important ones are the ones that are come for the foreign investors, and they are also planning to give some payments this year to the power producers. Finally, over the medium term, we understand that, and the authorities do understand that for the power sector, there are very significant issues that have to be resolved. For instance, the technical and distribution losses, the governance of the discos. So these are the things that on the medium term that the government is working on, and they're part of the program. Next. Thank you. I'll turn over to Zafar now.
Thank you, Sahar and Esther. I'll quickly touch upon the reforms that are undertaken to improve the fiscal framework, SPP autonomy, and the SOE's governance. These are the three major institutional reforms that are embedded into the program. And also I will quickly touch upon the normalization of the monetary policy. So in order to improve the fiscal framework, different reforms have been undertaken. For example, the TSA1 has been already completed. TSA2 is under the process, and it is likely to be operational by June. The practice of approving supplementary grants has been strengthened. The cash and debt management functions have been strengthened. The capacity of the MOF to forecast cash and debt sides, that has been strengthened, and the procedures and the expenditure control systems have been strengthened. Next please. Okay, so here we could see, in order to sustain the government's effort to strike a balance between sustained growth and inflation, the monetary policy has been normalized. There is tightening to the extent of 2.75 basis points. These efforts have been complemented by rolling back the refinancing facilities, and the State Bank is committed to market-determined exchange rate, and also it's trying to build reserves. There is also commitment to remove the existing exchange restrictions and multiple currency practices, and the monetary policy has also been strengthened by incorporating the element of forward guidance in its communication strategy. The CRR was raised to help the stabilization process, and now the SBP publishes the MPC calendar, in advance for the monetary policy meetings. So this was about normalization of the monetary policy. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is basically the SBP reform. In order to make the SBP autonomous and accountable, several aspects have been enhanced in the State Bank law. So the objective has been clarified. Now price stability is the primary objective of the central bank, followed by financial stability, and there is a prohibition on the extension of direct credit or guarantees to the government, because it is inflationary, and this thing impinges with the price stability objective. The decision making by Monetary Policy Committee and Board has been strengthened. Financial autonomy is strengthened. Statutory basis for audits is there, and accountability has also been strengthened. So these are the sort of broader reforms that have taken place in the area of enhancing SBP autonomy. Next slide, please. Okay, in order to just before going into the SOE governance reforms, just to give you an idea where we stand. So here you could see Pakistan is not that good when it comes to the SOE's operating losses, right? And here you could see the major, the elephant in the room is the power sector. But overall, the composition, if you see the composition of guarantees and the debt, the public debt, it's almost more than 2.5 trillion in this area, right? So that's why it deserved to reform this crucial area. Next slide, please. Okay, so the reforms that are undertaken in order to enhance the governance of the SOEs. The SOE law has been extensively debated, and it is now it is recently approved by the cabinet, and in the next stage it will go to the National Assembly. This framework will be supplemented by the SOE policy, which the MOF is working on, and it's in the final stages. The central monitoring unit will be established at the MOF to monitor on regular basis the SOE's performance and all that. And the exercise of triage was conducted by the MOF with a view to retain strategic SOEs, restructure the ones that deserves restructuring, and then either retain it or privatize. And then the third area is a classification of the SOEs that are meant to be privatized. So these are the major reforms which will help improve governance and fiscal framework as we go on. Thank you so much. Excellent.
So in terms of where efforts are going to be placed over the coming months under the program, there is still 3 reviews for the program to be completed in September. Next slide, please. And the slide summarizes key areas for dialogue and with the authorities and for policy actions. One of those Safar has mentioned is the SOE reform, revamping the SOE institutional framework. I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we are very much focused on promoting macroeconomic stability, and at the same time, we are pursuing institutional reforms that improve, the efficiency in the economy, and that, can possibly generate some structural transformation in the economy. One of those is exchange rate flexibility. Is values determined by the market, and this is critical because Pakistan's imports dependence is not independent on the management of the exchange rate artificially to keep it artificially strong in the past. So the market determined exchange rate is gonna correct that over time. The other one is the SOE reform, to improve, as I said, efficiency in the economy. And then in the area of revenues, we are going to continue working with the FBR to rebuild the tax system, focusing on the personal income tax, increasing its progressivity, streamlining tax brackets, reducing tax expenditures which are unwarranted. And then in the area of the energy sector, we will continue better targeting the subsidies, or designing the subsidy scheme which is better targeted. And in the area of the financial sector, there is this initiative to take the existing refinance facilities, and Pakistan has a legacy with providing subsidized credit to certain sectors of the economy that do not have easy access to credit out of inadequate financial inclusion. So those to be taken out of the balance sheet of the central bank and create a development finance institution to that purpose. I think we will leave it here and then open up to questions. And thank you very much for your patience also with the technical difficulties, and to the team in the room for their support in sorting them out.
Thank you so much for a wonderful learning session. Greatly appreciated. The floor is now open for question answers, sir.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Dr. Esther for giving a very thought-provoking presentation about the IMF, focusing on a sustainable future, where we see opposite in Pakistan. And what you are saying, we are facing more unsustainability, and I'm starting my question with Amartya Sen's statement which he gave in a UNDP report 96, IMF in an attempt to balance the budgets and balance the lives of people. This is our criticism. David Stuckler, Oxford scholar, professor, health sociologist, he conducted his studies in Ukraine after Ukraine departed with Russia, Soviet Union former. And according to his findings, IMF programs produce more poverty, and he linked the poverty with the cases of tuberculosis. Unfortunately, we don't have this kind of studies. And again, there is a study of Francis Stewart, sponsored by UNDP, suggesting an adjustment with the human face, but we don't have a human face too. IMF supported an adjustment, and again, Joseph Stiglitz criticism. In his book, Globalization and the Discontents, he also criticizes IMF being more undemocratic and imposing cookie-cutter conditionalities. And these conditionalities are producing what half said, life is a nasty, life is a brutish, life is a shortage, and this is what we are facing now. Here in Pakistan, because IMF is imposing more taxes, and especially the indirect taxes, and IMF itself has suggested to Pakistan to reduce indirect taxes by $300 billion, right? Just the last part. We have a exchange rate of fluctuation, we have a low inflation killing the people, and this inflation is a cost push promoted by taxes and increase in the petroleum prices, gas prices, withdrawal of a subsidy, and IMF's policy to wages, and this is what they call austerity. Okay, because these are producing more pain, more mayhem, misery, and further. I have so many questions really, but there are questions to be brief. The our program are producing a more unsustainability, more misery. So many empirical studies I can quote from Latin American countries. We have served there, from European countries, from Asian countries. Even Pakistan was a signatory to IMF in the 90s, which the economics called decade of the last development, and now we are facing a more same sort of a situation.
Sir, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope.
It's a general comment. Let's take a specific question.
You can take more questions.
Well, because this question is comprises of several questions, I would like to take it right away. May I?
Yeah.
No, thank you so much for. I like to think of these discussions as an opportunity for the fund to be exposed to views, perceptions, and as an opportunity for us to explain what our role is and how we are working with the authorities for the sake of the national interest. Yes, which is the lenses through which we look to policies. And sometimes we are fully aware that some policies we encourage the authorities to undertake may not meet the expectations of particular groups in the society, but as a whole we pursue them, we would like the authorities to pursue them because, as you know, from a macro perspective, from an aggregate perspective, from a national perspective, they become a win-win. Now let me go over the various points you raised, starting with IMF programs create more poverty. And let me perhaps share with you one institutional aspect of the fund, which is sometimes not well, sometimes is not well known by the broader audiences. You know that at the IMF, and I think everyone understands, staff is disciplined by our department directors. Department directors report to our managing director. The managing director reports to the board of directors of the countries. What is, I think, a little less known is that the board of directors is also disciplined by a body which is the Independent Evaluation Office. It's a group of experts that look into funds performance, in this case in program conditionality, and what we can learn from that. And sometimes you are sitting in your office, and if you have been members, say I was member of the SDA bailout program on Greece, they send you an invite for an interview, and they collect views on how things were done, how did we engage with the authorities, with other relevant stakeholders in the country, and then they issue a report, which is public, and you can access all those reports that are thematic. So one of those actually covers the dimension you raised poverty. And what came out from that evaluation, independent evaluation, is that indeed in the past, in our programs, the fund would tend to underestimate the impact of fiscal consolidation, which was warranted, which was needed for the sake of macro stability, but which maybe was not attending to social objectives. Now, because of that, in many of the programs, I think we'd say, all of the programs that the fund conducts globally these days, we do have social targets. And Pakistan's program, this EFF program, does include social targets. And BISP spending, just to illustrate an example, this fiscal year is being increased 50% relative to the past fiscal year, and we engage with the relevant stakeholder, Dr. Sanyan, and discuss how is execution going. Same for health and education spending. This fiscal year is an improvement, I think, of 18 or 19% relative to the past fiscal year. So, of course, that does not mean that throughout time you may see programs running in parallel with increasing poverty, but you never know what would the content have actually been without programs, and there are multiple factors that may influence poverty, which are distinct from the program design. On taxes, the GST reform, just to, because it's the one we just accomplished with the authorities, I want to reassure you that it has been designed to minimize the impact on inflation. It will be an impact state-wise increase in prices. That's a fact, yes. Now, we don't expect those increases in prices to be permanent. And we have designed the reform in such a way to minimize the impact on inflation and to protect the most vulnerable. Yeah. So, for example, the GST keeps exemptions for food, keeps exemptions for sales in small by small retailers, informal markets, the use of exemptions for the use of food production for food consumption, medical and health-related goods. So that's taken care of in the design. Then in terms of the exchange rate, it's one area where, as I said, Pakistan in the past managed the exchange rate and in the direction of keeping it artificially strong. The evidence, the international evidence, and this is important to emphasize, when we promote exchange rate flexibility, we look at extended time horizons and what has any country to gain over extended time horizons from exchange rate flexibility. And here the international evidence is clear. Countries with that are significantly exposed to terms of trade shocks. Countries with a high level of import dependence. Countries with a legacy of twin fiscal currency crisis, they have the most to gain from exchange rate flexibility. Now, you are very correct in emphasizing that pass-through effects from depreciation to inflation remain elevated in Pakistan. This channel is very powerful. Well, that's out of import dependence, it's out of demand rigidity in many sectors in the economy because of past management of the exchange rate to keep it artificially strong. And that is going to take some time to be corrected. Indeed, volumes won't react immediately, but it's a process, an adjustment process Pakistan has to go through. On the energy sector, I think, as Sahar explained, the priority here is to turn the sector into viability. The city flow continues to increase, and it adds to a stock of circulate which is very significant. And this is a priority because it has an impact already on the real sector, on the balance sheets of the banks, and eventually some of this has to be fiscalized, and there is not much room to fiscalize. So viability is of the utmost priority, and to work on things that you can influence immediately, and that is where the alignment of talents with costs comes in. It does not mean that we are not working, on areas as we are working today on areas you will see results over the medium term. Medium term does not mean that we are waiting, years for working on those areas. It means that we work on these areas now, you won't see the results immediately. And this is the electricity legal losses, and this is the plans for privatizing the discourse and so on and so forth. And then in terms of, the IMF or the programs not making a significant contribution to economic performance, I think that sometimes it is downplayed what we are achieving with these programs. And again, we won't observe the counterfactual, but in the context of the program, I think our partnership with the authorities passing a public finance management law, passing an SDP Amendment Act, these are very important steps because they build the market credibility of the country. Because basically what these reforms are doing is to lay the foundations for macro policy management, which is more robust to changes in the political, leadership, and to make these policies more free from political interference and more merit-oriented and technical based. I think this is very important. The tax system, Pakistan needs to rebuild the tax system. It does not mean that we should downplay the importance of tax administration efforts. Now, when you think of the three main reasons why a country may be collecting taxes inadequately, there are three, broadly speaking. One is the rates are low. Second, the tax bases are too narrow given the rates. And thirdly, tax evasion. Pakistan doesn't suffer from particularly low rates. But there is a big problem with tax bases being too narrow because of manifold exemptions which are unwarranted by economic and by social considerations. And you need to streamline that, and you need to create a culture where agents internalize the fact that taxes cannot be or should not be fine-tuned or managed to meet the expectations of particular groups in the society. Tax system is very important to manage it in a way that minimizes distortions, because taxes influence the relative prices if you have these manifold exemptions. As you manage these relative prices, you may have unintended consequences in the allocation of resources, and this is where distortions come in. And it is very important that they are designed in such a way that minimize efficiency, maximize efficiency or minimize distortions. Then if there are other goals that have to be attained, social, promoting innovation because of market failures, one needs to think of other instruments that are more appropriate, that are more targeted. But when you have, the tax system fraught with these inefficiencies, then in the end it's self-defeating from a macro perspective. Think of the evolution, the developments in investment to GDP ratio in Pakistan throughout decades. Did it increase out of these exemptions? I think Pakistan has great potential and has to push their efficiencies and competitiveness, leveraging and with levers different from the tax system. Advanced economies, even emerging economies, do not have so many goals and objectives attached to their tax system. I will leave it here because I think I was very, very long and we want to take more questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have time for 2 or 3 more specific questions?
Yes.
Okay, please, questions specific.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to refer to this fund facility from Saudi Arabia, who recently granted these funds of about $3 billion to strengthen the currency of Pakistan. So when it issued these funds, the State Bank of Pakistan had the reserves of about $15.5 billion, and after it issued these funds, within 2 months, they again came back to their previous levels, such as of around like $16 billion. So this $3 billion couldn't go impacting this or impact on the strengthening the currency of Pakistan. So my question is on this: how much should IMF have to spend to achieve these objectives? So what I personally think is that these objectives are they are wider, and the amount of spending that is being spent by IMF is they may have less impact that one can think of. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, no, I can take one at a time.
How we pay?
Yes. Yes. Very good. Okay. No, I would like to take one at a time. As Zafar emphasized during this presentation, one of the key goals within the program is to promote exchange rate flexibility, and as of today, the exchange rate is primarily market determined if you compare with the situation prior to the program. Now, this is going to mean for quite some time an adjustment in its valuation. The depreciation has been significant since market is the primary determinant of the exchange rate, because it has coincided with a negative terms of trade shock. That means the exchange rate is playing its role to absorb the shock, and also because of this unwarranted fiscal stimulus I was referring to, that has been corrected with the supplementary finance bill, and that is detracting from demand pressures. Now, going forward, when it comes to exchange rate developments, of course, is one of the most difficult variables to predict for economists. One should just think in terms of fundamentals of the exchange rate. So one of those is international prices. We, as of today, and depending or contingent on geopolitical developments, but as of today, we would think that the peak in international prices we left behind us, but of course, again, contingent on geopolitical developments. And as of today, the fiscal policy contribution to the policy mix is, finely calibrated. It's going to detract from demand pressures. That's another important fundamental. And the other one is policy uncertainty or policy certainty. Yes. So what we've seen since the completion of the six reviews is that there's been a turnaround in the exchange rate, and is now either appreciating in the days subsequent to the six review or stabilizing. So that's what I would say broadly on exchange rate dynamics. Thank you.
One last question, please.
Thanks for such an enlightening presentation. My name is Masood Ahmed. I'm assistant professor here. From the presentation, what I have understood that on the one side there is a normalization of the monetary policy. On the other hand, I have also seen that there is a curtailing of the fiscal space to the government, which is sometimes used for political purposes and leverage as well. But we have seen during the pandemic that Keynesian economics has actually come alive, and the government has supported during this time period the poor and those who really need the support. So after the IMF program is being implemented, so what kind of the fiscal space would be available to the government to initiate such kind of initiative, to initiate, in the developing countries, we need social support and others. So where we are going to, as a public, are going to find out and hope for growth during this time period, where we also see monetary policy rates are also going high. So specifically the future of the government fiscal space after the implementation of this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think one of the slides was plotting the trajectory for debt to GDP, and that trajectory is deemed sustainable. Now, then we have some probabilities attached to that sustainability. So we deem it sustainable, but not with high probability. Yes. And that has to do with the fact that this the sustainability analysis is a stochastic analysis, so we stress that trajectory with different types of shocks, standardized shocks, and what we see is that the debt is highly responsive to those shocks and can depart from that nice downward trajectory if under those shocks, and with conditions not being very, very strict. So it means it's a delicate, balance. It means that when it comes to fiscal space, there are efforts that have to be done, as Sahar was mentioning, also on the spending side, and by creating savings and economies in those areas of spending that are the least productive, or that are the least efficient, I would say. But it's very important what you are emphasizing, because may we go back to that slide in the presentation where we had a chart on the SDGs? We can walk you through back. Here it is.
Next one.
This is just an illustrative exercise here. You may have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals agenda spearheaded by the UN, and which the fund also collaborated to specifically quantify what it would take for countries to attain the SDGs intended date, the 2030, which is becoming more and more elusive because of COVID. But this is one chart that illustrates where Pakistan stands vis-a-vis peers, and there are several, notions or exemplification of peers on various SDGs comprising or including health, education, water, sanitation, electricity, infrastructure. And what it basically tells you is that Pakistan is far off, those peers within the same income per capita group that we take as benchmarks. Yeah. Now, when you take that to the numbers and you try to answer that question, how many additional percentage points of GDP in terms of spending will be required to attain those SDGs, and then to keep the provision of those public goods at that level? Well, those numbers are very, very significant. It's over 10% of GDP additional points. Yes. So it means, and that goes back to the discussion on taxes. You can, finance some of these via intertemporal substitution and growing debt, but intertemporally it has to add. Yeah. So you definitely need to link your revenues to GDP, because there is no way you can attain those goals by saving on the spending side. And I don't know the numbers of how much you could gain from streamlining spending for Pakistan in particular, but I do know that for another country I covered prior to coming here, Guatemala, those numbers for Guatemala were, 7 additional percentage points and maybe 1 percentage point, 1.5 from, streamlining your spending. You need to have like a strategy to lift your revenues, and that also includes tax administration efforts, of course, to fight tax evasion.
Can I ask the last question? It's a very good answer. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now request Vice President Admin and HR, Mr. Imtiaz Qazi, for the concluding remarks, please, sir.
Thank you very much. I dislike turning down questions, so I would suggest, because we have today, I think, 6 or 7 meetings, and we need to go, but I would just encourage us to reach out on a bilateral.
That was about IMF support for COVID.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, to
Yes.
recalibrate. But there were reports in the media about the irregularities. Just we want to know, as a citizen of Pakistan.
Yeah, reach out on a bilateral basis and we will be very happy to engage. Yes, thank you so much.
Mr. Imtiaz Qazi for the concluding remarks.
When we were in college, during our college days in the early 70s, it was a fashion to be a leftist, And at that time we used to think that IMF and World Bank and USAID and all other multi-lateral donor agencies are actually suckers of blood. But as we matured in age and as we came in contact with those agencies and negotiated with them and talked to them, then we realized that whatever we had heard is not true at all, and that they are there to help us. And it is only the ruling elite of that country which has to then derive complete benefit from whatever is offered and donated. Let's not forget that the World Bank was the agency which gave us terminal debt, and it gave us the Indo-Pacific Treaty, which is one of the best treaties of the world. I mean, it has withstood test of the time, in spite of the 4 wars that we have fought. So, what I'm trying to say is that those cobwebs got clear from our mind when we interacted with those agencies and with the fund and with the World Bank. Having said this, thank you very much, madam. It was a pleasure listening to you, and thank you to the distinguished members of your team. It was very enlightening, and I'm sure that you will keep coming to us again and again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would now request the Board of Trustee members for the presentation of mementos. Mr. Ali Mandviwala Sahab, Mr. Zahur Hussain Shuja Sahab, VP Admin and HR Mr. Imtiaz Qazi Sahab, Dean Social Sciences Dr. Riyaz Sheikh and Acting Dean Dr. Mohammed Kashif for the presentation of mementos to our speakers, please. And Madam Nasreen, please. Madam Nasreen, can we have you on the stage, please, ma'am? Thank you. Okay, first presentation of mementos to Dr. Este Perez Ruiz, please. Dr. Zafar Hayat, please.
Yes. Thank you.
Ms. Sahar Masood, please. Last but not the least, Mr. Muhammad Ali, Office Manager of IMF Office. Thank you so much, everyone, for your presence and participation. We now request the guests to proceed for the tea to the boardroom. Thank you.
Thank you.
हाँ मेरे भाई